This next video comes to us from LiussDBD, who is somebody that we watched last week in their very, very fantastic video about how to create a toxic DBD community, which I thought was very, very insightful and good, not only DBD advice, but life advice. Very, very wonderful and fantastic content creator. So make sure you hit that link that just showed up in the Twitch chat. If you're on YouTube, it'll be down in the description below. To like and subscribe to this creator because you should support the official release of the video, or else I hate you and you smell. Today, we're going to be talking about why there will never ever be another DBD killer. Why will there be something that never takes down Dead by Daylight? So let's see what their take is. Also, hey, Up, hopefully you're doing well.
Dead by Daylight is a special case where a game takes hold of a whole genre. When you think of a multiplayer asymmetric, you think of DBD. Yeah, there are others in that category, but no one has been able to overtake that top spot. We're going to be looking into why that is, why those games fail to live up to expectations, and the negative ramifications of that for DBD players.
Do we get to dog on VHS again? Because I'm always down to dog on VHS. I'm always down to dog on VHS. Let's go.
Let's begin by looking at three games that had the biggest potential and how they met their fates.
Yeah! Put him down!
VHS is an 80s aesthetic game that showed a lot of promise. Unlike in Dead by Daylight, the survivors, or teens, could fight back against the monster player by crafting weapons. On top of that, it was free to play. All of that sounded really good to people who were getting burnt out on the state of DBD at the time, and the numbers showed. People were hyped, and the game even amassed 50,000 wishlists on Steam. However, it wasn't long before the first cracks started to show up. After giving content creators access to the game to drum up hype, the closed beta began on November 24th, 2021. A big initial mistake was that the devs wanted to go for an exclusivity angle at first, with only a handful of players getting beta keys for this stage of the game. To the general public that really wanted to play, they'd had to pray to the RNG gods that their email was selected in the waves of key releases. Despite the developers having their own expectations for how many people would play because of how limited those keys were, the game still suffered from server issues as more and more people got invited. And those server issues just kept getting worse because that following February, the game was targeted in a DDoS attack, which actually caused VHS to be down for 3.5 months. During that time, the devs were fixing lots of issues within the game itself to secure it and avoid that type of thing from happening again. However, players were given no estimate on how long it would take. This caused lots of people to just simply lose interest because it was taking such a long time. Finally, the game returned in May with its second closed beta, and it had a fancy new name to show off. Unfortunately, this rebrand caused a bit of confusion because so many people already associated the original name, VHS, with the game. On top of that, VHS was just a better, catchier name than Video Horror Society, so the new title never really caught on. The attempted rebrand aside, it also took up to a week for the original beta players to get their updated keys while initially not letting new people into the beta. Although they did go back on that and started sending out more waves of keys. For returning players, however, they came back to see all of their progress in the game has been reset. Everyone started from the beginning again.
And at this point, there are people who had hundreds of thousands of hours, hundreds to thousands of hours in the game at this point, and the game's still in beta. You understand that? You had people, like, at this point, with the combined time of playtime of some players, like, some people were, like, in the hundreds to thousands of playtime. Like, what if you wanted to hop in, or you just got a fresh key, and you wanted to hop in, play some VHS, like, you could be facing, like, 1,000-hour Andy and put you down, like, in, like, 2 seconds. Like, the game was essentially out, but not actually out. And it was not very beginner-friendly for that reason.
Not long after that, the problems surrounding the game got a whole lot worse. In June, the Hellbent CEO's account was compromised alongside the game's official community Discord server. A malicious message was sent out there, claiming to be first access to a new game the dev team is releasing. In reality, as you might have guessed, it was a virus. Obviously, the game's Discord server was removed, but the damage had been done. Anyone who downloaded this supposed brand new game had their Discord account and servers taken over. In the following month, Video Horror Society enters early access for anyone to play. A tremendously exciting thing for all the people that have been waiting to get their hands on the game. There was just one issue though. There was no matchmaking essentially, so someone who's brand new was already going up against beta players with hundreds of hours of experience. The skill gap was immense, and it didn't help that there was no real in-game tutorial. So a new player would have to learn as they play, or more realistically, as they lose.
Yeah, get dumpstered and not get to win.
There was also the issue of one side being more enjoyable than the other. linear. Asymmetrical games will always struggle with balancing the two sides. It's in their nature, but this really was a problem here. Monster was just too hard and not fun. Thus, the teen side had way more people lining up to play, increasing queue times. Additionally, throughout the game's life cycle, new content was few and far in between. There was also very little advertising for the game, to the point that I think it's safe to say that most of the people who are familiar with it are only familiar with it because of word of mouth. They saw their favorite DBD streamer play it. Their DBD friends were talking about it, and gameplay videos were recommended to them on YouTube. It seemed like no one outside of that sphere was aware that the game even existed. All of these issues piled up over the next year, and it led to a huge announcement on June 9th, 2023. Video Horror Society is shutting down. It was never even officially released. Its whole life cycle was just 2 closed betas and early access. This announcement wasn't really a surprise, as there had been a massive drop-off in the game's average players, down to even just double digits. It simply wasn't financially successful enough to keep it going, and as a result, the game will no longer be playable after September 8th, 2023.
This one's
on
just
May
sad.
26, 2017, Friday the 13th fans got their first franchise game in a very long time. Developed by Gun Interactive, Friday the 13th
was doing Texas Chainsaw,
was announced. As the hype exploded amongst players, so did the servers on launch. The devs anticipated this, so they upped the server capacities, but even then, that wasn't enough. And if someone was an Xbox player, they were out of luck. No one on that platform could even play for the first week because the devs mistakenly got the wrong Xbox server license, which was meant for a much lower player capacity. Even after that first rocky week, the game still regularly suffered from server issues. Despite that, the developers continued to work to improve the quality of the game and on adding new content. The future looked bright, but unfortunately, in 2018, tragedy struck in the form of a copyright dispute. I won't go into too much detail because copyright law is a whole thing that's inherently complicated in cases such as these. But the gist of it is that Victor Miller, the writer of the original Friday the 13th movie, sued Horror Inc.'s Sean Cunningham, owner of the rights to the Friday the 13th franchise. The lawsuit was to decide if Miller rightfully owned all the characters that appeared in his script and thus should be compensated for all the movies, despite not writing for any besides the first. As a result of this, the video game devs couldn't make any new content during this time, as their game itself was essentially in legal limbo over who owned what. This went on until 2021, where Victor Miller won the case and got the rights to the first movie characters in the United States, while Cunningham keeps the rights to the iconic adult hockey mask Jason, but he can't use him in a movie without Miller's permission. So essentially, to really license
which is
Jason,
still not really a good
both sides
resolution,
would have to work together and compromise, since again, it's still very messy with the rights being split. As a result of all of this, the devs announced in June of 2023 that the license to the game expires on December 31st. The game will get pulled off of shelves, physical and digital, on that day. It'll, however, still function through at least 2024. The price of the game and DLCs were lowered to make it easier for anyone that wants to try it out. And on top of that, they also eliminated the need to grind and rely on database servers by maxing out everyone's character levels and giving them unlockables for free.
So sad. It was such a fun and cozy game.
On May 13th, 2022, Saber Interactive released
Evil
Dead,
this.
the game, and people were having fun with it at launch. It had a brief beta a few months prior, but only on Xbox, so this was a breath of fresh air for many. While other games replicated DBD's style a bit, it can be argued that this game tried to push the envelope. It tried to shake things up when it came to the asymmetrical gameplay. Survivors had a multitude of objectives to progress, and the demon had to plan ahead and consider what would be the best way to kill the survivors. On top of that, survivors could also work together to gang up on the demon. This was a recipe for something new and promising. However, it suffered from a lot of things the other two games went through. For one, balancing issues. Demons feel underpowered and can easily get rolled by experienced survivors, which leads to longer queue time. Since
I remember watching a friend of mine used to play this game a lot. I would watch her stream in like Discord, and it was funny just watching people dodge or DC all the time. Like all the time. People would like dodge or DC like constantly because they were just so frustrated. It was just like so crazy.
Side is more fun. And even then, it's not as fun as a survivor if you're playing solo. That, alongside an intense grind and an unforgiving skill-based matchmaking, makes it really hard for newer players to get into it, and it never really grew. If you wanted to play on PC, it was an Epic exclusive. It was even given out for free at one point there.
Yep.
Alongside being free on PlayStation
for
PlayStation Plus subscribers. But it didn't come out on Steam until late April of 2023, almost a full year later. The big cherry on top is the port poor communication from the developers, who take a really long time to fix multiple game interrupting bugs and exploits. There's already a huge content drought with no word on when or if new stuff is going to be added. So many in the already small community feel like the devs just really don't care anymore.
Yeah, which is
as
fair.
That same community keeps getting smaller and smaller. So with those three out of the way, DBD still reigns supreme. A credit to that is the mere fact that the game has lasted this long. At the time of this recording, it's celebrating its 7th anniversary, and along the way, it's had its fair share of hiccups. Some of them being the exact same type of issues as the previously mentioned games, especially when it comes to balancing. And yet, for all its problems, it's still here. To understand that, we have to go all the way back to October 2016. It's 4 months after the game officially launched, and everyone is excited for what the devs will do for our national spooky day, Halloween. And they hit it right on the nose with the reveal of the very fitting Halloween chapter. I like to reiterate once again, this was 4 months, and this is only its 2nd DLC chapter. The mere notion that they'd be able to get such a huge license so early on is insane. That right there solidified the game's hold on that genre.
Well,
it became
do you see her eye twitch there? I've never noticed that. I've watched this so many times. Look at the way her eye twitches. Like she does a little like like for a second, watch her.
Early
watch
on
her.
Is
watch her eye.
That right there solidified the game's hold on that genre.
I've watched this so many times, and I have never caught that. It's all the stress, dude. What happens to her eye there?
Is insane. That right there solidified the game's hold on that genre. It became something truly special going forward because that paved the way to more well-known IPs. License holders were more likely to want to work with Behavior because they demonstrated they could be responsible with how they handle licenses. Behavior also has contacts in different industries that could vouch for working alongside them. These much smaller video game developers that put out similar games can't compete with that. Also, Behavior has a ton more money than them. Speaking of money and other game developers, there's a reason there's 2 Resident Evil chapters alongside a range of cosmetics. Capcom and Behavior have a good relationship because they're both in the gaming industry and they understand what people want to buy. It's no coincidence that DBD reached its all-time player peak on Steam the same month the first Resident Evil chapter was announced. New players are more likely to be interested in a game because their favorite character is going to be added. This is actually when DBD was first put on my radar as well. On top of that, it incentivizes current players to keep on playing because of the new content. It also brings back old players into the mix. Behavior's ability to acquire licenses is huge and a big reason why there's no other real competition. However, taking that #1 spot on top comes with drawbacks. Mostly for us. Competition benefits the consumer. That's you watching this video. Your life is made better because companies compete with each other. You get better phones, improved services, and updated norms, all to get your attention and more specifically your wallet. Take that away and there's less incentive to innovate. For example, there's something that we as gamers heavily rely on: internet service providers. More specifically, for gamers like me, American internet service providers.
Which suck and they're terrible.
Give every American watching a moment to stop shuddering as they remember all the different times they've had to deal with these companies. There are only a handful of these, and yet
I'm a
service
Spectrum
the
gamer.
entire
Terrible.
country. There's
Absolutely
seemingly
terrible.
an understanding amongst the top ones to not rock the boat too much, to moderate how good their deals are so they could all compete within that very narrow range. That's why their strategy was to work together and even merge so that only a few are left at the top. If you live in the US, have you ever asked yourself why your internet bill is so high compared to the speeds you're getting? Other places like in Europe, Japan, and Korea,
There's nowhere else to go.
The southern one, get much faster internet at a fraction of what it cost us. The reason for this is because once early companies in the 70s laid down the infrastructure in cities for the internet, they cut deals with local governments to have exclusivity over them, essentially monopolizing the infrastructure. Very much unlike phone lines that are used by multiple phone companies. It also stings because they lobbied, which is a fancy word for legally bribing, politicians to pass laws prohibiting cities from making their own internet networks. That's why in a lot of places, there's only 1 or 2 providers that can charge whatever they want for the lowest speeds imaginable. Because what are you gonna do? not have internet? That right there is what happens when there's little to no competition. The incentive to improve isn't as strong, and we end up settling with what we get. This is where we're at right now. We're essentially settling with Dead by Daylight because there's nothing else really like it. To be fair to DBD, the state of the game currently is much better than it used to be, and the devs have actively been working on long requested quality of life features, alongside having quicker patches addressing issues. Now it's just a matter of if they could keep that up and by how much. Personally, I'd prefer it if they would decide to not do a new character or killer or map or anything like that for just a single chapter.
Yeah, Siege did that. They did a whole chapter.
They could use that time to
continue extended the game by a while.
Game itself, like a wellness chapter. In a perfect world, behavior would go through something like that to make the experience better for all of us, and that could potentially make a lot more money for them in the future too. Current players would have a lot more fun and play for longer. The game's good reputation could bring more players in, especially if it becomes easier to get into, because it currently takes quite a long time for a new player to no longer feel like they're new. It could also win back old players that have left. Unfortunately, that's not likely to happen because of money, namely the cash inflow for shareholders. Behavior is a private company, but they still have people at the top that invest in them, and in return want to continuously turn a profit. If Behavior ever does a wellness chapter for the game, they lose money in the short term, and that's what a lot of corporate suits care about. How much money they can make in the shortest amount of time while spending the least amount possible. That means we as consumers end up not getting as much out of that deal. So when you consider all that DBD has to offer and how much players and Behavior have put into it, it's really telling that the thing that gets people to stop playing is not another similar game, but Dead by Daylight itself. It's its own worst enemy. That's really the only thing that could destroy it at this point. I don't want to see that. I genuinely do love this game. Even if I didn't make content around it, I still enjoy it as much. I know others are like that too. That's why we have to come together and actively push Behavior to keep doing better, to hold them accountable. Heck, it was just an idea earlier, but now I really want a wellness chapter to improve the game's health, and I think I'm gonna be pushing for that, despite the odds. Again, I love this game, and I want to see it succeed and thrive, because if it does, then so do we. That's why I hope that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game is a success.
I love this game.
Their tech test was a hit, but even then, there seem to be issues on the balance side of things a bit, as one should expect from an asymmetric game. But mostly just info, a tech test after all, so we'll just have to see how it is upon release. It'll be Gun Interactive's second chance at this, since they're publishing this one too. I really hope it does well, so it lights a fire under Behavior's belly. If it doesn't, and it fizzles out like the rest, then we live in a reality where DBD's biggest long-standing competitor is dead by Roblox, and I honestly don't know how to feel about that.
Now I don't know, when I first saw this video in my recommended, I didn't think it would be about like covering like the history of how other ASIMs have failed, because obviously I feel like that's kind of been a topic that's been kind of like done to death for the most part, which is why many of us are kind of like just tired of hearing about it. Because like it's something that I've covered on the channel so many times. Like a lot of it comes down to wish fulfillment and making another game out of hate for Dead by Daylight, and a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff that, you know, like a lot of stuff that we've already talked about. I think, yeah, like you can make other things that are like alike to DBD that will also be successful, but you shouldn't. I feel like it shouldn't be anybody's goal to like try to like dethrone Dead by Daylight. DBD servers just died. I was hearing that in the background because for some reason, like, I have no internet connection, even though I clearly we're streaming right now. So, yeah. Case in point, like DBD is just a clunky mess, and if you make something that's fun, but not in opposition to DBD, or something that's just fun, that's just naturally something you want to gravitate to, like the Texas Chainsaw game was for me, like people will flock to it, and people will eventually get sick of just like this stuff, where just like your stuff's just breaking all the time. You know, like your stuff's just broken and wonky and weird. You know, somebody puts out another polished experience, not to replace Dead by Daylight, but it's just like fun and good and something you want to go to in your own right. Like, eventually people will go to that. And they won't do it consciously because they hate Dead by Daylight. They're just like, well, okay, well the servers are down here for like no reason, or this bug's really bad and I don't want to run into that bug, so I'm just gonna go play this other game. That's how you would really do it. That's how you would realistically, quote unquote, beat Dead by Daylight, is you wouldn't even make it your goal to defeat Dead by Daylight. Just make something of equal and good quality alongside it and doesn't have like the same issues that it does. And that would be appealing. That would be the most appealing.